Stuart Goldberg. I'm a professor of Russian here at Georgia Tech, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers. The first speaker will be Hyoun-A. She is an assistant professor in our School of Modern Languages at Georgia Tech in German. Her overarching research interest lies in bilingualism and language contact at their intersections with society and identity. Her dissertation was on causal architecture and naturally acquired German among Korean immigrants who had come to Germany for work, language, living and working in the country. And more recently, she's been working on intercultural pragmatics and intercultural communicative competence. She sees growth in intercultural communicative competence as connected to creating and maintaining peaceful relationships. And today, Dr. Zhu will be speaking on the case study methodology of conflict management in foreign languages.
So in order to keep it with the time, I have my script. All right, okay, so the title of my talk is Case Study Method and Conflict Management in Foreign Languages. And it is followed as structured. I want to think about a little bit what the connection between peace conflict, global leadership, and intercultural communicative competence is. And I would like to argue at the end that intercultural communicative competence is actually at the core of conflict management and peace education. Then I'll introduce the case study method. The beginnings actually was funded by an AGREC grant also a couple of years ago. And then I introduce my case study. And hopefully I bring everything back together at the conclusion. So Johann Galtung, who is considered the father of peace research, differentiated between positive peace, which he defines as the absence of structural violence that brings about social justice, equity, harmony, and so forth. Then negative peace, he understands as the absence of personal violence, that is violence that affects the physical realm of the individual, such as war and conflict. And I'd like to say that I think offensive language, hate speech, miscommunication contribute to conflict, but in the same way then appropriate and effective communication, especially across cultures or intra-cultures, promotes negative peace. According to Paul Lederach, conflict is not necessarily negative as it entails a potential for constructive change. So as long as conflict serves as a catalyst for growth and transformation, it is something positive. And especially he points out that relationships are at the heart of transformational process. So according to Lederach, peace work is an intentional effort to address conflict by increasing understanding, equality, and respect in relationships. And Betty Reardon defines peace education as something where we are developing a consciousness that enables us to function as global citizens to transform the present human condition by changing the social structures and patterns of thoughts that have created social structures. And I'd like to argue that if we think of someone acquiring and using a foreign language, and also acquiring and using foreign culture and the knowledge in it, this person actually is perfectly situated to increase understanding, to have respect in relationships, to develop a consciousness and a pattern of thought that is appropriate for a global citizen. And so that is actually what intercultural communicative competence is about. But before I come to the intercultural communicative competence, I'd like to think about those whom we want to be able to manage conflicts and build peaceful relationships and sustain peace. So according to Push, we can think of various tasks or skills that a leader needs to be able to do: mobilize a group of people that are diverse, articulate very clearly and convincingly a vision and guide people towards accepting it, bridge differences, take various perspectives and experiences into account for decision making. And all this are actually aspects of skillful communication. Andre Cabrera, who also happens to be our president at GT, actually, and his co-author Gregory Unruh wrote global leaders can be made. Global leadership is a muscle that can be trained and get stronger and more dexterous with focused use and practice. And so for me, I'm interested in how we can train future global leaders from a linguistic perspective or applied linguistic perspective. Which brings me to the intercultural communicative model, competence model that I'm using. There are many out there. I'm using the one by Michael Byram. So this model has two parts, basically, a linguistic part and a cultural part. So an interculturally competent communicator must have high linguistic, or I'd say should have high linguistic proficiency. So the individual cannot only utter a sentence on a grammatically, accurate level so we can understand, but this person also can read the socio-cultural cues in the specific context of the interaction and can communicate according to the cultural norms of the interlocutor, which is from another culture or subculture. So, for example, I could ask, how would I phrase a refusal? How would I phrase a request culturally appropriate so I don't offend the other, but I actually bring about something that is about agreement? Another important part is the intercultural piece. So, for example, let's jump to the knowledge part, for example. There are many aspects. I will not go through all of those, but knowledge, for example. Do I have knowledge about the other culture? Do I know about the history, the society, the people, the values, the communicative norms of the other ones? And can I apply it to my communication? And what attitude do I have? Am I curious, open-minded? Can I withhold judgment? Can I gain new perspectives? Or, do I stay in my comfort zone? And all this basically is also what brings about the critical and cultural awareness. To be sure that this is not necessarily true for the foreign language educators, I brought two studies from the business side, the Pearson Skills Outlook study and the Bloomberg Skills Gap study, and both highlight that communication is the #1 in-demand skill wanted by the employees. So what the employees want is communication skills. And so I would like to argue that the process of acquiring a foreign language actually uniquely situates the individual to develop the desired communication skills, also relationship skills, also leadership skills that is needed in the industry out there. Okay, so how do we get our students to have these communication skills? So I want to say that it has to do, or a good method is the case study method. So the case study method originated in the early 1920s during the inception of the Harvard Business School. It's since been used also in, healthcare or political science, diplomacy, etc. Case studies help to bridge the gap between academic and practical work. They also go beyond intellectual learning because it encourages affective learning and therefore positions the learner to arrive at change for affect, such as motivational attitude. For example, empathy would be something that could be learned, or it has been shown to be learned through a case study. There are different types of case studies, as you can see here. So the case study I will present to you today is a role play case study. Students had to submit written and oral work, and it is based on a real incident. The real incident is Tesla in Grünheide. So in November 2019, Elon Musk announced to build the 4th Tesla Gigafactory, which is the first in Europe, in a small town called Grünheide, which is near Berlin, Germany. And the plans of the CEO, Elon Musk, were actually, and still are, highly controversial. So while politicians, and you can imagine Tesla fans, and also the German economy, they welcome with open arms Tesla Gigafactory, but there were environmental activists, trade unions, and also citizens of Grünheide who expressed concerns and opposed the construction of the factory. And because they filed many, many lawsuits, Tesla wasn't able to start production as fast as they wanted. So the actual, so as of summer 2021, Tesla didn't have an official construction permit. It only got it in March 2022. In comparison, in Shanghai, the Tesla factory, Gigafactory, was built within a year. Okay, so the conflict now is Tesla wants to start the production ASAP, but there are lawsuits that delay the completion of the factory and the start of the production. And so the students were placed as German and business admin double majors. They exist at Georgia Tech. And they are interns at Grünheide in summer 2021. They're specifically hired because of their intercultural communicative competence, and they were asked to help the Tesla management in Grünheide to resolve the conflicts with the critics. So I used 6 weeks of my semester, last semester, to go through the case study. They had a lot of authentic material to work with. So I interviewed, I developed the case study 2021 in summer. I interviewed the mayor of Grünheide, a representative of an environmental activist group, and a representative of the trade union. And so with that, I developed the material that the students enhanced. It's all freely downloadable here. If case study is something for you, I recommend the the George Washington University Cyber website, where I was a fellow to develop this case. They have cases in all different languages: Arabic, French, Spanish, etc., and all the materials free for download. All right, so I had a bunch of learning objectives. I will not go through all of them, but I just kind of tried to color code that the learning objectives I was targeting were cultural knowledge. So for example, the second one, the right of co-determination, was important for me that our students understand the history of it in Germany, etc. Of course, they had to increase their linguistic competence. They had specific vocabulary to go through. They had debates and, what are the linguistic means to do a debate, to convince someone, etc. And then I had assignments that were geared towards intercultural competence and awareness and so on. I had a variety of assignments. Again, I will not talk through all of those for the sake of time, which I don't know how much I have left. So I will talk about the stakeholder engagement map, the strategic plan, and a little bit of the exit survey. So these assignments, unfortunately, I designed them in the hope that they would increase mutual understanding between Tesla and Grünheide, like the two positions in the mind of the student. And of course, I wanted them to communicate in a culturally effective way. They were allowed to only use German. Okay, what's the stakeholder engagement map? The task of this one was that the student should understand basically all stakeholders' positions. So we identified 4 stakeholders. Grüne Liga is the environmental activist group. Politicians, it's basically the mayor of Grünheide. There were citizen initiatives from Grünheide, and then IG Metall is a trade union. So these four stakeholders we had, and they were tasked to research the historical background, mission and vision, and the arguments they had for or against Tesla. And so this is an example how it looked like. So, so for each stakeholder, they came up with their research, and they had to learn and study all of those, understand everything basically, because on the day of presentation, they came to class, they didn't know which role they would be assigned. I just randomly assigned them a role, and then they would sit together. We did a talk show instead of a presentation. You can see here we had a mayor on the right-hand side of you, and so on. So you can see the different roles, and then they had to use the knowledge that they prepared to do the talk show. And they named the talk show Hallöchen Grünheide, which sounds a little bit like hi, therefore hi there, Grünheide. And the other students, they were the audience. They were allowed to ask questions. They were allowed to applaud if they liked an argument, etc. The strategic plan was then for the students at the end of their internship to present to the Tesla management some specific recommendations they would give to the Tesla management how any further delay, any further lawsuits could be prevented. So I will not read through the instructions. That's basically the purpose I just gave you. And so students came up with a variety of deliverables, for example, brochures, flyers, and then newspapers. That was for the older generation. They understood that in Grünheide there is older generation mostly, so they wanted to have something that targets this age group. But they are also producing some TikTok videos, etc., for the younger groups. They offered or suggested press conference, open house, town halls, etc. Everything they suggested is emphasizing relationship and connecting on a personal level. By the way, this is what the Tesla management in real Germany did not do. So I would say, like, I applauded my students, but of course Tesla has reasons to not do it that way, but that's what the students came up with. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the exit survey. I had a bunch of questions. Basically, I wanted to understand, did they change, 2 minutes, did they change their perspective? Yes or no? What did they process throughout the case study? Here, okay, just because of time, I will just skip a couple of slides. So here was one question I asked: please reflect on the challenges and successes in understanding and representing the various views of the stakeholders in Hyoun-A. And one student wrote the talk show activity. We had to think on our feet in German, so that increases linguistic competence. And our ideas and beliefs about Tesla and Hyoun-A, and they got challenged with that. So they had to, change a little bit also their perspectives and think about from a variety of angles. And this definitely helped me to better understand the perspective. So I think that's a good example that is repeated in all these statements. I will just go over it. I will not go over it. I will just quickly skip through it. Another question: I understand the complexity of the Tesla factory in Hyoun-A better than before. Almost everyone agreed, which was definitely a goal of mine. I skip over those just for the sake of time to come to the conclusion. All right. Okay, so I wanted to build the argument, and hopefully, even though I couldn't give you much of the result of the exit survey, you would agree, or probably all of you see this as well, that intercultural competence is at the core of conflict management and peace communication. It contributes to peace building or negative peace building. It contributes to building and sustaining relationships across individuals, across cultures, and it's therefore an ingredient for conflict management. The case study method in itself is also very effective to foster high language proficiency and also to develop intercultural communicative competence. And it also helps students to develop characteristic of global leaders to differentiate understanding of attitudes and appropriate skills. And I will end with the quote of one of my students, who said, I also love how we were working on a real-life problem while integrating in and learning real-life business and communication strategies that are totally transferable and beneficial for students to know in the future. And then ideally, our president, Angel Cabrera, GT president, would then say, and yes, we hope you make a lifelong commitment to pushing yourself to acquire, develop, hone, expand the skills of global leader. It is the only thing that will address our global challenges in a way that builds sustainable prosperity for everyone. There's never been a more opportune or important time for being global. That was, if he thinks that was true 2012, that's definitely true today, 2024. Thank you. Most of all,
We'll hold questions for the end. Our next speaker is Kathleen McGovern. She serves as assistant professor in the Department of Literacy, Language, and Culture at the University of Southern Maine. Dr. McGovern's scholarship focuses on arts-based research and pedagogies in second language education, and particularly the use of drama to teach English as a second language. And one of her recent publications is Enlivening Instruction with Drama and Improv, a guide for second and world language teachers from Rutledge. Today, Dr. McGovern will be speaking on peace building through theater for international students.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure. Before I start, is there somewhere I can look to see how much time I have left? Yeah. Thank you, Ethan.
Of course.
And that's nicely because one of the things that brings me here today is Ethan, in that he recently served as an editor on a ESOL journal special issue about language education and peace building. So I'm really grateful for the invitation and for him kind of pulling together this community. One thing, so this is very interesting. I think I think when the slide transferred, it didn't like include my co-author's name and contact information, but I have it on the final slide. So hopefully it's there. My co-author's name is Vedat Yagane. He is a learning lead at Harvard University's American Repertory Theater. And I'd love to share his contact with you at the end too. Please feel free to get in touch with either one of us if you have questions or are interested in learning more about this as a practice. So I'm going to talk to you today about a collaboration between the American Repertory Theater at Harvard and a nonprofit adult ESOL school serving immigrants and refugees in the Massachusetts area. This work that we do has two aspects, the pedagogy and then the research aspect. So I'm going to talk first about the pedagogy, so then maybe you'll have a better idea of what I mean when I'm talking about research. So basically, this was an after-school program that was developed by my colleague, seen not leaping, but coaching someone else in leaping here. He got these students together after school every day for about 3 months. This is one cohort that I'll be focusing on today, although the project lasted from 2021 to 2023. And he engaged them in storytelling and drama exercises, but not just within the classroom. This culminated in a performance at Harvard's American Repertory Theater, which is one of the most prestigious stages in the whole world, really. And so the students got a chance to perform their stories for a public audience. At the same time, the ART was putting on a production of the Broadway musical 1776. So this performance was sort of adjacent to that. The public audience was invited, and they got to engage with the students around the themes of 1776, which are kind of questioning the beginnings of our country. So they were invited to attend the students' performance and for us all to consider together what it means to be American and what it means to be a new American. So the study focused on how this performative approach to language education positioned learners and promoted intercultural dialogue and peace building, if it did at all. And we drew, as we thought about peace building, from the work of an Iranian scholar. So I'll say first that my co-author and the primary facilitator of this pedagogical project is Iranian. And he was heavily influenced by the work of Dariush Shaigan, who is a philosopher who in the 1970s sort of came to this conclusion that unless people learned to dialogue across conflict, particularly he was thinking at that time about the East and West, or Iran and the United States, then violence was going to erupt. And lo and behold, violence erupted. But before then, Dariush Shaigan established a Center for Dialogue and Civilizations. He was trying to promote this intercultural dialogue. After the revolution, Shaigan was exiled from Iran. But many years later, in 2001, when things calmed down a little bit, he was invited to return and re-establish his Center of Dialogue and Civilizations. My colleague, Vedat, was invited there to facilitate theater, to promote dialogue. And so this idea is that when the existing paradigm is one of war, domination, and violence, the world needs to hear the voice of peace, dialogue, and compromise. So what we're doing with this practice is saying, well, drama is a wonderful way to promote dialogue, especially amongst international, intercultural, multilingual people, because we can dialogue with our whole selves, our whole bodies, beyond linguistic differences. And this quote is from Iranian President Khatami, who after 2011, when the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center occurred, he petitioned the United Nations to declare 2001 the year of dialogue of civilizations. thinking we need to find some way to continue to dialogue throughout this conflict. Fast forwarding, my colleague Vedat is doing this in Iran, and his theatrical activities are perceived as a political threat. And so he fled Iran as a refugee, relocated to the United States, and many years later is now like quite an esteemed theatrical practitioner working as a learning lead at Harvard. And so on to this, on to what we're doing now, rather than in the 70s and 2001. So when we think about how does this relate to language education, I think it relates in two really important ways. First of all, in the world of TESOL and language education, there's a big movement to affirm learner identities, bring their lives into the curriculum, and center their stories. There's a lot of work done on the importance of storytelling, positioning our students as worthy to speak, and creating trusting bonds of sharing. On the other side of that, particularly in research on performance in language classrooms with immigrant and refugee learners, there's been a little bit of pushback about that, which is very interesting and important to consider. And this pushback is around, if you're doing drama with your students, especially if you're asking them to dramatize their own lived stories, well then who are you asking them or allowing them to be? Are you asking them to perform the identity of immigrant or refugee, or are you allowing them the freedom to embody whoever they want to be through theater? So that was something that we were keeping in mind as we were doing this research. And I really love this quote by Kanyas, who is a theater practitioner. She wrote a manifesto about this whole topic, saying, she identifies as a member of the refugee and immigrant community, particularly the asylum-seeking community. We are not your next interesting arts project. Our community are not sitting waiting for our struggle to be acknowledged by your individual consciousness, nor highlighted through your art practice. We are whole humans with various experiences, knowledge, and skills. We can speak on many things. Do not reduce us to a single narrative. And that is something that we really, really tried to center in both our research and our day-to-day pedagogical work. So for this study, we used an ethnographic case study. I won't sort of belabor what we did, but I think the diagram is kind of interesting because it shows the number of people there and where they all came from. We coded it, and then we came up with some important findings. So the first finding was that this practice of having students perform their lived experiences positioned the students first and foremost as actors, rather than, well, this is a language learner, well, this is an immigrant student. No, these were people being trained as actors. They happened to be multilingual and in an ESOL school and program, but we can see this in Vedat's facilitation, saying one person is talking, but everybody's acting no matter what. When I'm acting, I have to have a reaction. There was never any explicit correction of, you didn't conjugate that verb correctly. I understood what you meant, but you said it with an accent that was different. It was all about, are you attending to your fellows in this ensemble? Similarly, it was about establishing a connection, as all actors have to do, with the audience who are present. And here, Vedat is instructing them, what is it about me that I want to share with people, that I'm asking them, does anybody care? What we want is to grab them, the audience, in the guts. So this whole focus in preparing this performance is, what about yourself do you want to communicate to this audience? And how will you do it effectively? This also provided students with a space to reflect on their own experiences, both as people in the classroom and on a broader societal level. So at the end of each rehearsal, we circled up and there was a general question, how do you feel about today? Or how is everybody? This was one of the very first comments from any student across the whole program. He said, I think this place is the same as a sanctuary. The outside is the jungle. In the jungle, I feel alone. I am an immigrant for some time. I belong and know, and in this moment, I can think about this. So this is providing space to reflect on broader societal issues. And I won't read this whole thing, but it also provided space to reflect on interpersonal conflict. So there was a rehearsal, someone said, oh, she was bothering me, she was laughing. And Vedat's response to this kind of call out of she was bothering me was, listen, it's not about the note you play now, it's about the following note. That's Miles Davis. He really inspired me so much. So he's not managing the class. He's not saying, now, calm down, everybody get along. He's saying, well, we're trying to make some really good art right now. So how do we invite this conflict into our art? It's a part of being in the classroom together to disagree. So great, thank you for disagreeing, and let's move on with that. It's called yes and in improvisation. And finally, it's about bringing this to the broader community through the final performance. So I'm going to skip that and go ahead to what they performed. So here is one of the monologues performed. The students performed in their home languages as well as in English. So in this monologue, the student performed concerning the three main questions of life. Who are we? Where are we from? Where will we go? I think home has already helped us with half the answers. We grow up to who we are now in the gardens of our original families, and we go on to build our new homes through our own choices. We are not just objects in the home, but more importantly, we are the subjects or main characters of our home. This is so beautiful to me because she's positioning herself as a philosopher, right? Not as someone who is kind of having trouble adapting to a new country, but someone who is a holistic being worthy of sharing really complex ideas, thoughts, and emotions. And this was seen in the audience responses, who, when we did a thematic analysis, they really revealed that the audience took that up. I love hearing everyone's own languages and heartfelt thoughts. True home can be hard to come by even for non-immigrants. Found myself so moved by witnessing the through line of the human experience. So we found that ultimately this approach really did position the students as holistic beings with experiences worthy of being heard in one of the most prestigious forums for being artistically heard in our country. So I think I kind of covered the discussion very quickly. These are some questions that throughout the symposium have resonated with me, and I continue to think about in my own work. Who do we center, amplify, and encourage, and how, versus who do we censor, silence, and erase, and how? How do we allow, who do we encourage our students to be? If we make safe spaces, who are they or should they be safe for? They can't be safe for everyone. And how can we dialogue across conflict and difference? And hooray, my co-author's email does appear on this final slide. So please feel free to reach out to either of us with any questions.
Our third speaker today will be Nuria Alonso García. She is a professor in global studies at Providence College. She works in Spanish language, foreign language pedagogy, English as a foreign language, and linguistics. And a recent publication was doing more with less, civic practices for longer-term impact in global service learning, published in Frontiers. And today, Dr. Alonso García will speak on the CLIC project, Language Stories Matter.
Here, moving forward.
I'm so sorry, guys.
So first of all, thank you truly for having me as part of this incredibly enriching dialogue. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Stuart, for all the guidance and support. It brings me joy to gather and talk about how through language, how through dialogue, we can understand each other better.
and develop a better sense of belonging, particularly in current times where we feel isolated and not always as connected to humanity as we would like, or I would like us to be. So I'm going to share with you a project that I was invited to participate during my last sabbatical journey in Montreal, in Canada, and at the Université de Québec. And it's a CLIC project. The CLIC project looks at these intersections of culture, language, identity, and community, and invites us to really look at the language learner and ourselves as language learners and also educators from a holistic point of view, from an integrated point of view. So we're not just learning the infrastructure of the phonetics, syntax, and morphology, but we are learning about our positionality with respect to the language that we study and the language that we speak. We learned about who we are with respect to the communities with whom we engage with the language we are studying, and also what kind of challenges, prejudices we might face when we speak with an accent and when we speak our truth with our accents. So, so as foreign language educators, we really our mission within CLIC, but also personally, it's really carrying out this responsibility of supporting a student on becoming actors of change, whether that is through dialogue, whether that is through actual activist involvement, whether it's through being global citizens that respect diversity, that elevate voices that have been marginalized, whether are their own voices or voices from the community. So the CLIC project, the mission of the CLIC project is to recognize the socially, culturally, and historically situated nature of second learning, and really to promote this multicultural consciousness. Those of us who are being exposed to a variety of languages understand how vulnerable it is to express oneself in that language, to enter a space where you are not the dominant language, and how to really through inclusive pedagogies and forming these alliances and equitable partnerships, these endeavors could be achieved, and diversity of voices and talents can be elevated. Students at UQAM, University of Quebec and Montreal, could partake in the CLIC project as a 3-credit course seminar for 1 semester, or as a 6-credit course for an entire year. These are some of the aspirations of CLIC, and mainly CLIC is a framework to an alternative framework of language learning that really comes from a decolonial perspective of language teaching, in which, the faculty, the teacher holds the knowledge, holds the only stewards the process, but rather we as a community, we as a CLIC community co-create these opportunities for learning and growing together, not only in the understanding of the foreign language, but also in the understanding of each other and our responsibility to the larger society. So my colleagues and I, Jamie Demperio, Martina Kozlowska, those are who invited me and hosted me for a year. in Montreal and beyond continue our collaborations are also language learners ourselves. And we have experienced that sense of being an outsider, that not having, developed the full sense of belonging because of our language, because of what, that happened. Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, in the CLIC, that's how we kind of aim it. In the CLIC space, we come together without the hierarchical boundaries that traditional education system have put in place for us. So we believe that learning is liberation, that second language literacies and advancement is liberatory. And through that, we can really start engaging in dialogue across differences, dialogue about different point of views and cultural heritage and legacies that might conflict, but we can still respect them from what they are. So a framework, and our colleague spoke beautifully about storytelling and the impact that storytelling has in second language acquisition, and particularly in the context of ESOL and drama. And I couldn't keep by, thinking of Augusto Boal, right, and the theater of the oppressed, and how within the theater of the oppressed, the actors become those who lead. And that's kind of the framework that we adopted within CLIC. The students lead. The students join this group because of fear of how they are perceived when in those international contexts they speak English with an accent, or they speak a variety of English that might not be perceived like the prestigious or the most prestigious or the most sophisticated. We know about ethnic accent bullying. We know about linguistic discrimination. We know about linguistic imperialism. Those are real fears and real challenges that we have faced as language learners. So I was entrusted during my time at UCAM to conduct and capture the stories of students in the 2021-2022 CLIC cohort. And I talked with them for in-depth interviews. I looked at their work. I worked with them for that year. And some of the common themes that emerged from those language stories were how to negotiate those identities in multiple languages, the cultural isolation that they experience, building community through language learning. And stories, as is being said, are part of human experience. And that's the way that I believe that through language and storytelling and eloquent listening and cultural humility, we could come together in much better dialogue. As I mentioned, they really spoke experience, prejudice, experience isolation, and found in CLIC some courageous space being now said. And those stories are stories of resilience, are stories of living in between languages that resonated with me personally, because as immigrants, we occupy those third spaces, right? And truly, through this storytelling and this sense of empowerment in the CLIC conversation, in the CLIC dialogues, in the CLIC activities, whether we're blog writing or conference, student-led conference and presentations, they become more confident and more assured, more affirmed. It's that idea of affirming identities in second language learning contexts, and really were prepared and felt responsible for moving forward into society and be also advocates for this kind of work. There's no more time to expand upon this, but briefly, CLIC has continued at the contest to come. We've expanded it to a collaborative online international learning, a COIL initiative that we run for an entire semester, and where students came together to develop projects from across borders by students at Providence College, students at UCAM, and came together in these collaborative online learning initiatives and facilitate dialogues, conversations for change based on the sustainable goals, data project, voices from our communities that collected stories from folks in their communities who have experienced this kind of work. So it's that idea of, expanding the radius of these actions and continue to build inclusive. Thank you very much for listening so eloquently and again for hosting me.